Hi, welcome back to Bernina Club. Okie doke. So I'm going to show you how to make these really easy fabric boxes today. However, they can be made into bags as well, toilet bags or normal bags. The reason why they work so well is a product called Soft and Stable. So this is like a type of foam, and it's very, very good because it can be bent, but it keeps its shape. So it's wonderful. It's been one of those things that when you make a bag out of this, it will last forever. It can be washed, but it always looks good and stands up really, really well. So it's very good for fabric boxes. Now, when you're making these fabric boxes, you can make them as simple as one plain colour. Very, very simple. A nice binding around the top and a lining inside. These boxes actually can be fully reversible if you like, and you can do all sorts of things with them. So you can make them into a bag by putting a zip completely down there, making them to a bag that shape. You can fold them on the fold line, both sides. I'm just going to put a couple of clips and show you. And you can put a stud on in the middle here, and the same to this side, and you can completely change the shape of it, put some handles on, and make a really, really cool bag. So the sky's the limit. I think, oops, I haven't folded in the fold line. I think a bag out of one of the ones I'm going to show you next would be amazing. So that would make a really cute bag. And the best part about this particular size and shape is when you open it up, it's huge. So it's really, really big inside. Now the secret to getting these nice is the top stitching on them. So I'm going to be showing you how to do that. So the first thing you do is choose your outer fabric and your lining. Decide if you want to split up the colours with an accent fabric like I've done here. But since I've been making this, I do suggest you cut the shape out when you've finished quilting them or stitching them together, because they do shrink a little bit. So what that means is before you cut your lining, finish your outer first and then re-measure. But I'm just going to put a lining together to show you how to make them. So this is 16 1/8 wide, and I'm going to put right side to right side just so you can see how to measure it up. So you've got two linings. I'll do the lining first, and the outer is done exactly the same. Right, so I'm going to do this as per the instruction on this side, then I'm going to show you a different method on this side. So it is 16 1/8 inches here, and it is 10 by 1/4 inches here. Now in the pattern it tells you to cut out 3 1/8. So I'm going to find my 3 1/8 on here and 3 1/8 on here. Now I'm going to draw this so you can see it really clearly. Actually, I'll use this dark pen. So I'm going to draw that onto there. Okay? And I'm only going to do that side because I want to show you two different methods of doing a corner. Now this particular pattern has got a 1/2 inch seam, and this being the lining, I do not need to overlock these edges because, well, none of it needs to be overlocked because we're going to open the seams out. And I've just realized I've forgotten to bring something home, but that's okay. We can regroup. So we are going to do a 1/2 inch seam down the side, a 1/2 inch seam down this side, and a 1/2 inch seam down this side. Now in the pattern it tells you to draw your square here and cut it out. So I'm going to cut that square out in the corner like this. But I'm going to show you how to do the other side without cutting out your corner. Okay? So there is my corner cut out. So normally you do that to both sides. Now I've found over the years when I'm making a bag, I would do that to my outer because it's got wadding in it or it's got Soft and Stable, but I never do it to my linings. By cutting out that corner, you're getting rid of all the fabric. So I like to leave it in, and that's why I'm going to show you the two different methods. So I'm going to just do a 1/2 inch seam down those 3 sides. So I'll start off here and I'll do a 1/2 inch seam, and I've got a 1/2 inch mark on my sewing machine, and I'm just on straight sewing, and I'm going to clear it so everything's just normal sewing. And I will reverse and do a 1/2 inch seam there, and I will reverse there. Now if any of you have got a modern machine that has got stitch number 5, it is a button that when you push it, it will automatically go forward and reverse 6 stitches. So I'm going to use it now. So I've pushed stitch number 5 and it's going to go forward 5 stitches or 6 stitches and reverse. When I get to the bottom of my fabric, so I use that for garment making. I just realised I had it on slow speed. It's still on a slow speed, but a bit faster slow speed. When I get to the bottom, all I do is push the reverse and it... I've lost my thread. And it will reverse for you. So somewhere along here, very carefully, I've lost my thread. So I will just rethread that. Make sure there's no thread stuck anywhere, and I will just rethread it. Now, if that happens and you go, why did it happen? There could have been a knot in the thread. Who knows, any number of reasons. But don't stress about it, just rethread it. So the thread actually broke back here, which I didn't even realise. So I must have my thread sensor turned off. So I'm just going to start back here, and I'm going to clear and go pattern begin, and it's going to go forward and reverse again. And then when I get to the bottom, I'm going to use my reverse button, and then I'm going to cut. I'm going to turn it, so this time, you see I've only done here and here. This time I'm going to go from my seam, and I'm going to do my 1/2 inch seam. And I've still got stitch number 5 on, so I'm going to go forward and reverse. Oh, I don't need to, it does it automatically. Don't need. One moment while I just clear it. Sad, really. You automatically do it. You do not need to do it for this stitch, so we'll try that again. It automatically will go reverse. Yeah. There you go. Go down. And reverse. Now I have left my point turner and my clapper at work, which is silly because it's really good time to show you. So I'll try and remember next month. But what I want to do is I want to open out the seam and press it like that, okay? So I'm going to just lay it down on the table here to show you that I can use my little roller. So I can just pop this on here if I don't want to go to my iron, and I can just roll my seam flat. These really are handy without going to my iron, and do the same to the other side. So just open it out. I will go to the iron, but I'm just showing you you can use this if you want to. It's so handy. And then for the bottom one, the seam is going to go here, so I can just open this up here. Okay, it just saves you having to go to the iron at this stage. Now, this is my square. All I do to make the bottom of my bag is I put seam to seam. I've got my seams pressed open, and I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch seam across there, okay? So I'm just going to flatten that down there, and I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam. And there I've made the corner of my bag. So I've left number 5 stitch on, so it's going to go forwards and reverse by itself. And I'm going to sew all the way to the other end. Just saves going to the iron in between times. Reverse. Brilliant, isn't it? and lock that off. Right, now I chose not to do the same to the other end. Now there's two reasons for this. This is fine, however, if I leave all my fabric in the corner, it makes it stronger. So what I'm going to do is just cut across my point, and I'm still putting my seam to seam. Remember, I've pressed this one open, and now I'm going to press this other side open, so I'm putting seam to seam, but I've got a point. So I'm going to get my little pressing tool, and I want to make sure that these seams are together. Feels like it is, so I'm just going to have a look. I'm putting a pin through there, it should come out at the seam. Pretty darn good. Now, this measurement that I've sewn needs to be stitched exactly the same on this side. So I'm going to turn it around so you can see it. So I'm going to measure my sewing seam, and I'm going to draw a line on this one and stitch exactly the same. So I'm going to measure from here to here. I've got a tape measure on. Here we go. So it is from there to there. You can probably see it better than I can. It is 6 1/4 inches. So I'm now going to measure 6 1/4 inches across here, and I'm going to draw it with my line. Ouch. 6 1/4. So find 6 1/4. Don't use your mouth. And then you're going to draw that across there. Just remove that and put that on this side. Before you stitch that, there's my drawing line. Before you stitch that, open up the seam and make sure your seams match. Not that anyone's gonna look. Yep, they're perfect. Okie doke. So use your, once you've got it all pressed, make sure it's nice. Use your ruler and make sure you've actually done that square. Don't use your, oh, it's perfect. Okay. Right, so I'm going to stitch across that corner, and you'll see the difference by leaving the fabric in or cutting it off, okay? So again, I've got stitch number 5 on, but you can just back stitch it if you like. So you go forwards, it goes reverses automatically, you sew down, you sew through your seam, take your pin out as you go, sew to the other end, push your reverse button, and you've locked it off. You can lock it off again if you want to at the end. Now, so I have left all that fabric in. So what I do is I feel by leaving that in, it's made my base stronger. So I fold it down here like that, and I put a, it's hard when you're trying to hold it up, and I put a pin through there, and I'll just do a stitch through there to hold it. So if you look, that's had all the seams taken off it, but this has got more strength because that's been left in the base. So when I turn this through, you can see I've still got exactly the same finish as the other side. However, it's got more strength in the base. Okay, so that's all I do. So you can either have either or. Now I'm just going to quickly just stitch that. I'll just give it a quick press, because you only get one chance to actually press it when it's going inside a bag. So I'll just give that a quick press. And I will sew that, and I'll sew it from the right side. So I'll just go through here. I can feel my seam there, and I'll just stitch through that little seam. So again, stitch in the ditch, or stitch beside the ditch as the case may be. I keep forgetting I've got that stitch already on and I keep reversing it. There we go. So there is your base done. Now, this is the outside of the bag, and so your base just goes and sits in like this. This one's not going in here, but just to show you, you match seam to seam and you clip. And that is how you do your bags, and you do the outside exactly the same. Okay. So you've got two bags exactly the same, the outer and the inner, match your seams. Go. And if you like, you can straight stitch or zigzag around the top, and then you've got them, and it makes a reversible bag. So the inner for that one is actually going to be this bag. So this is exactly what I've just shown you. Okay, and both sides are going to be exactly the same. So this is the lining that's going to go in that bag. So once again, I've got my seam flattened, I open it out and I put seam to seam, make sure they are nice and straight, and pin so that your seams are together, and if not, just move it over. Put a pin in there. And again, remember this measurement across here has to be exactly the same. So let's see what this bag is going to be. It's probably similar. This one is 6 inches. So this one needs to be 6 inches across here. Okay, so 6 inches across there. So 3 inches to my center. Again, you can use your ruler, but that's fine, and we'll just sew across there. Then we've got our proper lining for our bag. And again, pattern begin, so it goes forward and reverses and all the way to the other end. So this is how I've decided to do my linings rather than cut out the square. I'll take that one out actually, because I'm not using that one for that one. And now I've got my bag all done, and I can stitch through there. I'll just pin it so I can show you. And stitch through there. So now can you see? Much stronger base because you've left your corners in. Okay? Much stronger base. So that would be stitched and then it's inside. I like this lining with this particular fabric. I think that looks nice. And they fit perfectly, so it's a very, very quick, easy thing to make. Very nice thing to make a sewer, or you can make them into bags. So that's not hard, is it? It's very, very, very easy. Then you just zigzag around the top or straight stitch around the top, and we're going to bind them. So I like doing my binding by machine when I'm doing a craft item. I don't hand stitch them. I only hand stitch it if it's a quilt. Okay, there we go. 1 and 2. That's going to look nice in there. So that one's all ready, well nearly ready, for my bindings. Okay, so when I do my binding, I really want to explain how you get the right width binding. So when you do a quilt, it's usually a lot thicker in diameter from the front to the back because you're using wadding. When you're doing something like this, it's very fine. So with bindings, you want to do a 1/4 inch seam both sides, and you want to double everything. So you've got twice the width. So I only need to do 2 1/4 inch binding on this to make it perfect both sides. So what that means is when I've stitched it from the wrong side and then over to the right side, you can't see your stitching line on the right side or the wrong side because you have cut your binding the right width. Okay, so with this binding, I've measured the depth and I've allowed 1/2 inch both sides and a 1/4 inch both sides for seam, 1/2 inch all the way over, and of course it's been doubled. So I've got 2 1/4 inch binding. Now how you sew your binding on, you use your 1/4 inch seam foot and you put your wrong sides together. Okay, so we're going to sew this from the wrong side and flip it over to the right side. So all you do, and I've shown you this before, so I'm not going to go into it in great detail. I'm just going to do a little bit and show you. I'll leave that join and I'll just show you so you can see it. So from the wrong side, a 1/4 inch seam. Oh, this one's reversing, of course it is because I've left it on. And I'm going to just stitch this bit in white and undo it so I can show you. Just go all the way along to here, just so I can show you really clearly. So that's a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, a 1/4 inch seam. All right, now I'm going to fold that up and I'm going to bring it all the way over to the right side, and because I've cut it perfectly the right size, it's just going to cover my straight stitching. You can see my straight stitching's in white and it's just going to cover it. Okay, so what I do is I use my clips and I clip this, and I'm going to painfully do this in white so you can see it, and I'm going to use a stitch which is actually for sewing on binding. So Bernina have put a stitch on your machine for sewing on binding. However, you can all do it with your blind hemming stitch. So I'm just going to show you the stitch that is designed for these machines. And it's number 1331 if you've got one of these big machines. However, it is just the blind hemming stitch, and you narrow it down to 1.1 width and to 1.1 length. Okay, so what happens is I'm going to turn this through, because this can be reversible, remember. I'm turning this through to the wrong side, and I'm going to sew on the right side, but I just want to show you I can actually leave this foot on, and I'm going to mirror image it. So I want to show you what it does. So I'm going to stitch, try and flatten this down so you can see it, and I'm going to have to unpick this, so it's going to be quite painful. So I'm just going to do a little tiny bit of sewing and show you what this does. This stitch does one bite onto the fabric, and then it straight stitches in the ditch. Then it does a bite. Can you see that? Maybe. And it straight stitches in the ditch. Then it does a bite, and it straight stitches in the ditch. Then it does a bite, and it straight stitches in the ditch. Then it does a bite, and it straight stitches in the ditch. That's a lot of stitching. A lot of words. So I just want to do that in white so you can see it. So you can see all that it's doing is catching just that tiny little bit, and when you do it in black you can't see it. All right, so that is the stitch. That is actually the blind hemming stitch, but it is designed for sewing on binding, so it's a brilliant, brilliant stitch. So that is how I do my bindings on my quilts if I'm not hand stitching them. And you can see from here, when I put it through the right side, you can see from here that you can't even tell how it's been stitched. It's very, very good. So matching your thread top and bottom is the key. And then when you come back, I'm going to show you some ideas for making these boxes.